Welcome to Heart with Keisha B, the podcast that focuses on the journey of grief, healing, and overcoming unforeseen circumstances. Whether you're dealing with loss or life challenges, this is a podcast that you don't want to miss. I am your host, Keisha B. So take a deep breath, open your mind and your soul, and sit back as we embark on this journey together. Hello, everyone. Welcome to a bonus live episode of Heart to Heart with Keisha B. You all already know, if you are a returning guest, welcome to Heart with Keisha B. If you are a new listener, thank you for your support today. But as always, you all know I don't start this podcast until we have some listeners in the space today. So call somebody, text somebody, scream to the other room. We need between 10 to 15 people to join us today on this live. And I know you may be thinking that's a lot of people to try to coerce to get here, but I'm here to tell you something. In the past, it worked. So I hope that you are one of my continued supporters that would say, you know what? Every episode I've listened to, every episode I've been a part of has been uplifting. So go ahead now, call those people, those 10 to 15 people we need in the room. Call somebody, text somebody, scream to the other room. But get these people here on this podcast because we have a guest today that is going to share her story. She's going to uplift people. She's going to probably make some people cry. She's going to touch some lives. But more importantly, we're here to make a difference. So again, welcome to Heart with Keisha B. And we'll just stay here while you get the listeners here in the room with us. But in the meantime, Esther, how are you today?
Good. I'm okay. I'm excited to share, scared to share, nervous to share, all of the things, but I'm good.
Completely understand. And so as we're waiting for the guests to come on in the room, Esther, you want to share with everyone, those that are listening and myself, where are you? Like where do you reside, should I say?
New Zealand.
Wow.
I'm in Auckland, New Zealand.
Wow. I asked that question, Esther, because here where I live, it's currently 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And so what time is it where you live?
It's 11 a.m. and it's Monday the 28th where I live.
Wow. So thank you for your dedication and your willingness to share today with the world. And like I said, when I started the podcast on this particular episode, I know that the message that you're going to share today is going to impact a lot of people. And I know it's also going to be triggering, right? And so I want to also put that message out there as you all are reaching out to your loved ones, your family, friends, or whomever. Know that today's topic could be triggering to someone. Again, our topic today is from silence to strength. It's going to talk about Esther's mission to change the narrative on sexual assault. And I preference the fact that it's going to be triggering, not that I don't want you here in this space. We do want you here. We want people to know that what Esther has to say matters, what you have to say matters, and to know that once you leave this podcast, if it's a subject matter that maybe you yourself have not felt confident in talking about, or you know someone that has not, hopefully after listening to Esther today, you all will gain the confidence to know that your voice does matter. And so, Esther, we're getting people to come into the room. We'll give people a few more minutes, and then we're going to go ahead and get started.
Perfect.
What's the weather like there?
Wet. Oh. It's having a wet moment. We're coming into autumn.
So wow. Wow, warm, that's interesting. So
yeah,
so we're entering. Yeah, we're entering our spring month. And let me also say to our listeners today, as you know, this is a live podcast, and as I do not control the internet, we're going to pray that the internet's going to be our friend today. So we ask that you please be patient with us with technology, but I've never majored in technology. I don't, I just do the best I can with technology, but hopefully technology is going to be our friend today. And so we'll give everybody a few more minutes, but again, call somebody, text somebody, let them know that Heart to Heart with Keisha B is about to start in less than a minute. And so we hope that you'll come on in the room and hear what Esther has to say. As she stated, she has come to us today, or she is with us today from New Zealand. And it is a Monday where she lives. It's a Sunday where we are. If you're here on the East Coast or here in the United States, it's still Monday for us. So what is you all's autumns like there?
Here,
Yes.
they can be a bit wet. They're
Yeah.
I'm in the North Island, so it's not too changey. We don't.
Okay.
It doesn't get that cold. It gets a bit cold, but it's not
Yeah.
UK cold. Down south can get a little bit colder, but where I am, it's kind of it's wet more than anything.
Okay. Makes sense. Makes sense. Well, so we're going to give people a few more minutes, but here's my last call to action. Again, as we're about to start Heart to Heart with Keisha B, call somebody, text somebody, scream to the other room. As you know, this is a podcast that we're wanting people to be in the room because we are wanting to make change. Now, what does that mean? That means that we're going to talk about some uncomfortable things. And today's topic may not be as comfortable. And we do understand that. But in order for change to occur, as I always say, we must focus on uncomfortable conversations. So you are in the space where your toes may get stepped on, your heart may pound a little bit. There may be some tears that come from your eyes today, but know that after this concludes, a change will occur, not only in your life, but in somebody else's life as well. So we're going to go ahead and start off this evening. So if you're seeking support from someone who can help you rediscover purpose, reconnect with your heart, and rebuild your life while honoring the legacy of your child that you love so deeply. Hello, I'm Keisha B, the therapist, a life coach, and a grief coach of Heart to Heart with Keisha B, and also the podcast host of Heart to Heart with Keisha B. As I stated, this is a space that focuses on grief, healing, and overcoming unforeseen circumstances. If you're a new listener, welcome. If you're a returning listener, thank you for your continued support. And if you're ready to engage in a raw, uncomfortable conversation, I must say, you are in the right place today. And so, again, I want to welcome you again, Esther, to Heart with Keisha B. And as you heard me say, this is a podcast today that's triggering, right? It could be triggering for people. It is going to talk about a very uncomfortable conversation. And again, as I stated, today's episode is titled From Silence to Strength, Esther's Mission to Change the Narrative Regarding Sexual Assault. And so, Esther, again, I know this is not an easy topic for you, but I want to thank you for sharing and being willing to share your story with our guests today here. We want to first start out by asking you, Esther, I know that you faced some incredible challenges throughout your life, right? And including the trauma of sexual assault at different stages. Do you mind sharing when did the trauma begin in your life?
The sexual assault the first time I was 13. And if I compare the different assaults, they're all very different, and they all had very different impacts, and they impacted the way I then reacted to following incidents.
Yes.
So the first one at 13, I'll go through. I remember I walked into music class, and as I walked in, I went to sit next to one of the guys in my class, and as I sat next to him, he put his hand up my skirt and grabbed at my breasts, and I hit him off and laughed it off. And then outside of the class, I waited for him, and then I punched him. But then this look, he got this look in his eye, and it was pure rage, and I've never seen anything like it. I mean, I grew up in an angry household, but that was just something. My whole body just said run. So I ran, and as I ran, we were on the top floor, and I ran down the stairs, and I got down one level, and then he grabbed my bag, threw me against the wall, and then he pinned me there by the throat. And he didn't say a word, but his entire body was pressed against mine, and he just stared at me. And I wanted to scream. I couldn't move. Not a single part of my body would move. I just stood there and locked eyes with him and just waited. And it probably took 2 seconds. It felt like I was there for 2 hours. And a friend came down the stairs, saw him, and grabbed him by the back of his shirt and just dragged him down the stairs. And I was stuck like a statue until he was out of my eyesight, and then I broke, and then I cried, and then nothing happened to him. I never told my parents because I refused to let the school tell my mum. They didn't call the police. Nothing happened to him. And so I kind of learned in that moment never to fight back, because it made it so much worse.
Yes.
So I kind of stopped the fight. And then this wasn't an assault, but this was I was 14, and I was at my friend's dad's house, and we were all there, and I was lying on the floor, and my friend's dad knelt down next to me. My eyes were closed, and he knelt down next to me, and he whispered, and he just said, "No one is ever going to make love to you. They're only ever going to fuck you.
Wow.
But when you're older, you should come back, and I'll show you what it's like to be made love to." And I kept my eyes closed, and I waited till he left. And he did leave. And so I never went back to that house again. Never told my friend, never did anything. Because every time I was like, it must be something that I am doing that is something about me that is making people do this. It's my fault. Society told me it was my fault. And then I was 17 and I went to drama school. And it was this really dodgy drama school, but I was so excited because I'd always wanted to be an actress. And there were 2 boys in the class, and those 2 boys ended up leaving. And I used to sleep on a sofa in the living room. And then when they left, I was asked if I wanted to go upstairs to the bedroom. So I was like, sure. So I went upstairs to the bedroom, slept. And that first morning, I was woken up and the cover had been moved down. And my drama instructor had his hand up the back of my nightgown. And he was just like running circles on my back to wake me up. Because I always sleep on my front, always have. And I kind of opened my eyes, and my stomach, I felt my stomach was just in knots. And I looked at him, and he's like, when you're up and dressed, we should go to the park and we can rehearse some romance scenes. And I said, and my stomach bombed out, and I said, I feel sick. I think I'm not feeling well. And he said, well, why don't, he's like, just stay in bed then for a little bit. I stayed still, and again, my body did not move. It just kind of, my mouth moved, my body stayed still.
Right.
He left. I packed my bag. I went downstairs. I rang my mum and said, I need you to come and get me. And as soon as she said she would, I threw up everywhere. And because I knew I was going to be in trouble had I stayed. And about 2 months later, I got a phone call from the police because the girl who went to the school after me didn't get away, and she was raped by this guy. So I carried a lot of guilt for a long time, and I was like, I should have said something. Then I was 17. I was a child.
Right.
And then when I was 28, I went out for a night out after work, and a friend came, stayed at my house. He'd missed the night bus. We lived in London. He missed the night bus and said, can I stay at yours? I said, yeah, sure. And then I got home, was like, sofa's there. He's like, can I just sleep in your bed? It'll be comfy. I'm like, yeah, whatever, just don't snore. I got changed, got into bed, and then I was woken up at some point after, and he was helping himself to my body, and the only thing I could do, I turned around and looked and just said, what are you doing? And he stopped. I looked at him and I was like, just go back to sleep. And I don't remember the rest of that night. I don't remember the next day. I don't know if I asked him to leave, if he left. It's not even a blur. It just doesn't exist in my mind.
Understandable.
But I sent him a text message. I remember sitting in my bed, and I have this image. I'm still in bed in my pajamas. And I sent him this text message. And I just said, "Why did you do that?" And he said, "Well, I thought that was what you wanted." I was like, "I was asleep. Why would you think I wanted that?" And I don't remember anything else about that weekend. It's just, I don't know. My mind's protecting me, maybe. Yeah. I don't know. It's never been there. There's like snippets, but. And then I went to work and I saw him, and in that moment, as I walked towards him, I was walking up one aisle, he was walking down another, and our eyes locked. And I just, in that moment, I made the decision that I was just it was done. It was my fault. I let him sleep in my bed. I let him stay at my house. I obviously, because he said that he thought it was what I wanted, I obviously gave him the wrong impression. So it was my fault. And everything. And I blamed myself. And I didn't speak to him for a few months. But then everyone noticed because we were really good friends. So I went back to being friends with him. And I was never alone with him again. I never let myself be alone with him again. But to keep safe, I just pretended it didn't happen. And I just got on with my life and I put a smile on my face. And then it got heavier and heavier, and ignoring the feelings, because I never let myself feel any of it. I was just like, oh no, it's fine. I'm fine. I've dealt with it. I was so far from having dealt with it. It was insane. It was just killing myself with the pain of what I wouldn't speak about. And because I started thinking then, this is all my fault. My friend's dad was right. I was completely unlovable. Because when you tell a teenager that someone's only ever going to fuck them and not make love to them, in their head, that means no one's ever going to love you.
Right.
And that, I carried it. Oh, there's still moments I still think that. And I have to get back and remind myself that that was just a sick individual saying something to a teenage girl. That was not a reflection on me. That was a reflection on him. But that had such an impact. And what my friend did to me, I stopped trusting myself. I stopped trusting my own judgment.
Right.
Because I thought I was safe. And I obviously wasn't. So I stopped trusting myself to make good decisions. I stopped trusting myself in relationship. I hated myself because this all had to be my fault. This was my fault. And that became too much. There was only so long you can hide that pain from yourself.
And, Esther, as you are talking, so many people, I'm sure, that are listening today or they may listen later will be able to resonate with what you're saying in this regards. So often individuals that are sexually assaulted are normally assaulted by individuals whom they know. Right. Not to say that strangers do not do it, but a lot of times it does happen to individuals by someone whom you originally trusted. Right. And you thought this person would never harm me. They're going to protect me. But ultimately, one finds out that those are the ones that normally are victimizing an innocent person. And so one of the things that you said that I want to dove into is that because of you begin to blame yourself. which ultimately a lot of times happens as well, right? People don't trust you, they don't believe what you have to say, and they make you think that it's your fault. And then you begin to internalizing that it's your fault. Was there ever a point in your life for the majority of the aspect of what has happened that you finally said, this is not my fault? I no longer can carry on this evilness that someone has placed upon my life. Was there ever a point that you were ever to say, this is not Esther's fault? I will no longer take ownership for what someone else has done to me.
It kind of only happened. I still have to remind myself sometimes, even now. But I think the time I really started to let myself believe that this wasn't my fault was when I ended up pressing charges against him. And it was in that courtroom that I kind of the lead up to the courtroom, that I really started to let go of that shame and realize that shame that I carried was never really mine. Like, I was carrying the shame of someone else's actions, and it was only during that I finally realized that I was willing to accept, is probably the better way of putting it, that I wasn't to blame for the actions of anybody else. It was nothing, had nothing to do with what I said, I didn't say, I wore, didn't wear, saying yes to a friend staying at my house, say yes to a friend staying in my bed. I'd done it before and nothing had ever happened. So it wasn't on my choice. It wasn't my decision, and I cannot be held accountable for the choices and actions of other people. And I kind of, during that court case, to find the strength to stand there, I had to accept that it wasn't my fault. And that was a really difficult thing to accept after years of believing it was always my fault.
I'm sure. So before we talk about the court case, let's talk about something I just heard you say, because oftentimes this is a stereotype that many people believe. Well, I mean, if she didn't want to be victimized, she wouldn't have wore that. If she didn't want me to look at her or touch her, she wouldn't have wore that. Because I heard you say that. I'm not sure if anybody else caught that, but talk about that, because you said it and it immediately resonated with me, because I hear people say that so often. And in today's society, I'm just going to say it for what it's worth, right? The clothing that's made now is not the same clothing that was made when I was growing up, right? And so one would easily now say, well, if she wouldn't have wore that little skimpy outfit, obviously she wanted some, right? Or she wouldn't have wore it. Let's talk about that from someone that may have heard that, whether it's because they said that to you directly or because of the line of work that you currently do with dealing with sexual assault.
It's something you hear all the time. It's something growing up. It's something in schools we were taught. The UK, you wear school uniforms, this standard, but the girls' skirts had to be a certain length because it was distracting for the boys. And in America, you see it on TV shows or hear it in the news, where if a girl wears a strappy top, she is told she has to go home and change. And they're not allowed to wear strappy tops because it's distracting for the boys. And it's like, for me, I'm like, in that instance, you're teaching two things. You're teaching the girl that whatever she happens to be wearing, if anything happens, it's her fault. And you're teaching the guys that they are not responsible for their own reactions to what someone's wearing. It's up to her. If she doesn't want you to react in that way, then she needs to change. And it's when parents, a lot of the time, they will see their teenage daughter in these short shorts, because it's the fashion, it is what it is. And they'll see their teenage daughter in short shorts and be like, you are not leaving the house wearing that. And it's like, do you have any idea what will happen to you if you wear that? And what parents don't realize they're doing in that moment is, if anything happens, she goes out in those short shorts, or she sneaks them in her bag and wears them anyway. If anything happens to her, she probably will not tell her parents, because they told her in that sentence that it's her fault. Because they said, if you wear that, I know what guys are like. They'll think this, they'll do this. You'll put yourself in an awkward position. And they're trying to protect their child. And I understand that. But what they're also saying inadvertently, she will think that means Dad told me if I wore these, then something bad's going to happen, and something bad has happened and I wore them. So it's my fault. And so she won't want to tell her parents that anything's happened, because the last thing any sexual assault victim wants is the people that they love to blame them. They already blame themselves. And the last thing they want is their parents or someone they love to blame them. So instead, they will wear the shame and not tell anyone, because it's safer than having someone you love blame you and saying, well, I told you not to wear them. It's your fault. And no parent would ever say that.
Right. Just unspoken.
To a teenage girl, you're going to say it. You're going to think it.
Right. Right.
And that's the society we're living in. You teach the boy that if you see a girl wearing that, just as I've told your sister, that if she wears that, something bad's going to happen. You're teaching the boy that if you see a girl wearing that, she's asking for it. And I hate that sentence. I've heard so many people say it, men, women. I've said it myself before. And I caught myself and I was like, whoa, 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 never, 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 never. No one is asking for it. You walk through a park naked, you're asking the police to arrest you for public indecency. You're not asking for anyone to touch your body.
Right.
And it's such a disgusting statement. It's a horrid statement that shames so many people.
Right. And thank you for bringing that up. And I want to pause for a second as we have people coming into the episode. Again, just want to make sure that we stress the title of today's episode is From Silence to Strength. And Esther's going to talk about her mission to change the narrative on sexual assault. And the reason that I'm pausing is because, as you see, this could be a very uncomfortable conversation. It could be a very touching conversation, but more importantly, it could be very triggering to someone who may be listening today. And so if you're currently listening and you have found something that has been stated to trigger you, I will ask for you to stay, but I do understand that if you cannot and do not have the strength to do so, what I would stress to anybody that's listening today is that if something resonates with you and it brings up emotion that is harmful, that is concerning, that you please seek additional services for yourself, whether it's talking with a friend, a loved one, a professional, whomever. But we do not want anyone to be in this episode, be triggered, and not know what the resources can be for you on the other end. But I do want to take moments throughout this segment to make sure that we state that this is a very sensitive topic today, and that it could present some triggers, and that we ask that if you stay, that you are aware of that. And we ask that and we understand if you have to leave, we do understand that as well. But we do ask that with this topic, that you please take care of yourself, and if necessary, receive services that you may need because of this topic. And Esther, I do want to say to you, not sure if you can see, but we do have a guest here by the name of Lynn Lewis, who says that she applauds you for telling your story.
Thank you.
So Esther, as we move on into today's episode, I want to talk about you moving on to getting to the point to where you knew it was important for you that you were going to file charges. Do you mind walking us through that, just even the courage to do that before even walking into a courtroom?
I never thought I'd do it. I never thought I would even tell that story. And it was only a strange bit of backstory, but I essentially I left my job in travel. I got into the film industry, and the film industry means you are busy. You are so busy. You do 12, 14-hour days, 6-day weeks, constant. And you don't have time to think. And after what happened to me, I was busy. I kept myself busy. I was never alone. Not ever. I would not allow myself to be alone I didn't know how to be on my own because I was scared of my own mind.
Mm-hmm.
And then in New Zealand, when COVID hit, we shut down. Like, borders closed, we fully shut down, and it was like 7 weeks. I think we were fully, like, no, you didn't leave your house. You could go to get groceries, but you essentially had to stay within 5 kilometers of your house. So, and I had one housemate who wasn't at home, another housemate who was working. So she essentially was in her room all the time, and I was kind of in mine. And for the first time in my life, I was alone, and I couldn't go anywhere. I couldn't do anything. I couldn't get away from myself. And then that's kind of when the nightmares started beginning, and I would wake up. It was this strangest sensation. I would be in my bed in Auckland, and I'd wake up and I was back in London. I was in my bed, and I turn around and he was there, and it was so vivid. And I kept having that nightmare repeatedly. And I was just like, my body was just like, it's time. It's time. We're doing this. So I rang a friend, speaking to her. She was like, you are not okay. And I'm like, I am not okay. I'm like, I'm far from okay. And all these emotions that I would never let myself feel just kept flooding through me. And I was a broken mess. I didn't know what these feelings were. I had no words to describe them. I just couldn't. I didn't have a clue what to do. And eventually I was like, I can't do this alone. So I went on Google and I Googled therapists, and I found 2. And there was this one guy I spoke to, and he was just like, yeah, I'm going to book you in tomorrow. I'm like, okay. And then I ended up going to 2 weekly sessions with him to start, because there was a lot to unpack. Because what he ended up saying to me is like, I had a session in his office one day, and anger started to raise up in me. And as it started to raise, I just looked at a piece of his carpet, and I just completely disassociated from the feeling. I just blocked it. I just took my mind somewhere else, completely blocked it. And he just sat there and he watched me. I came back and he's like, you back with me yet? I'm like, yeah. And he was just like, okay. It's like, that's quite the superpower you have. I'm like, what? And he's like, your ability to completely disassociate from your feelings because they're too hard. He's like, you've been doing this for your lifetime. And I'm like,
the trauma response.
Yeah. Yeah. And I was like, I've done it a few times. He's like, yeah. It's like, okay. It's like, let's work with that. So, and I was very good at it. And it's not a good thing to be good at that. I don't think. It saved me. It was really good at protecting me. It allowed me to live a really great life on the outside, and everyone was like, oh, you've moved to another country, you snowboard, you surf, you do all these fun things, you go on these adventures, you take risks, you do this. I'm like, yeah, it's because I don't let myself feel any of that. That's great, because that doesn't exist. That's not real. But my body's like, yes, it is. And I was with him for about 5 months, and we like dove deep on a lot of things. And it was the first time I'd spoken the words out loud that I'd really told people. I think a few people knew what had happened, like with the friend that I took to court. Not about the other instances. I've never really spoken about them at all to anyone.
I understand.
But I kind of spoke to him and was telling him. And then all of a sudden I sat there and I'm like, I have to tell people. I'm like, I can't keep this in anymore. So I wrote a blog post about what happened to me. And that was, at the time, the scariest thing I'd ever done. I pre-warned my family. I was like, FYI, something's going to come out. And I'll send it to you first. But this is I'm doing this, because I couldn't handle speaking it at that point. I could write it, but I couldn't speak it. So I wrote the blog and I put it out there, and I was expecting judgment. I was expecting everyone to blame me, everyone to hate me, everyone to, I was expecting worst case scenario. I was expecting people to blame me and judge me as much as I'd blamed and judged myself.
Right.
And every time I got a notification, like my heart just went, and I felt sick to my stomach. I was just like, oh, here it comes. Here's the judgment. Here it comes. Here it comes. Here it comes. And it never came. I was very, very fortunate, and it never came. My friends, my family, they were just really supportive, and they were like, we're so sorry. I had men come to me and be like, Esther, this happened to me as well. I've never told anyone before. And I've had a lot of people say, I've never told anyone before. Thank you for telling people your story. Then I can share my story. And that was a side effect I wasn't expecting. I didn't do it to get anyone else to share their story. And it was, I think the reason I ended up pressing charges is I did get one message that shook me, because it was from his friend. Now, I'd never put any disclaimer. I'd never said who it was. You would not know from reading the blog. There was nothing in there that would tell you. But he came to me and he's like, I have a question. Is it? And I was like, I don't want to say his name, but I was like, you're not wrong. And he was like, okay. I thought so. And he's like, you were always the girl with the sad eyes. He's like, I remember you were the girl with the sad eyes. And I always had a feeling he'd done something. And so he was good friends with him, like really good friends. They'd been friends for decades a long time before I knew them. They'd been friends the decade since it had happened. He was very involved in his life and everything else. And in the end, 6 months later, he came to me and he kept saying, what do I do? I don't know what to do. I'm like, because COVID, so he hadn't had to see him, because again, COVID in London was a bit of a close down. So he came to me and he said, what do I do? And I'm like, look, I am not about to tell you not to be friends with someone. I was like, I can't do that. I was like, what he did to me was what he did to me. I was like, you have your own relationship with him. You have your own like moral compass. I can't tell you not to be friends with someone. Because I also believe that people can change and show remorse. And if they're serious about it, then you can, like, it's possible for people to change. And so I don't know what he's up to in life. I don't know what kind of person he is now. I've no idea. So I was like, I can't ask you to not. And I think by saying I can't ask you to not, he sent him a message and said, you know what, I don't want anything to do with you again. He's like, I do not want you near my daughter. I do not want you near my wife. I will not be friends with someone who can do that to a woman. And I'm not interested. And then he got a response. It went, the standard, how could you ever think I could do anything like that? Da, 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 da. And then some other mutual friends took my blog post and gave it to him and said, this is why he won't speak to you anymore. And he read it and they were like, and he was like, well, it happened, but I apologized the next day. The anger that ripped through my body when I heard that, I wanted to wrap my hands around his throat. I was like, you kidding me? You didn't scratch my goddamn car. You helped yourself to my body as I slept. Like, you utter piece of, you've learned nothing. I
Right.
was so angry. And I think he wanted my number, and they were like, you do not ever contact her. They're like, if you've got any decency, you
Good for
leave
them.
her the hell alone. They're like, you
Good
do
for
not
them.
contact her. And then I was speaking to a good friend of mine from uni, and he was saying, he's like, Esther, you need to go to the police. I was like, do you have any idea what the police do to women who report this? I'm like, do you have any clue at all how they're going to treat me? I'm like, this is going to be my fault. They're going to blame me. Everything is going to be my fault. I was like, do you have any idea what that's like? He's like, no, I don't. He's like, but what if he does it to someone else? And that just smacked me in the stomach, because I'd already had an incident where I didn't report it when I was younger. And I was like, what if he does do it to someone else? I was like, maybe he has in the time I've been silent.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, I have to. I have to do this. And I didn't want to. But I'd have regretted not doing it more than I regret ever doing it.
Understandable.
So I had to do it. Like that 28-year-old version of me needed to speak. She needed to speak up for herself.
Mm-hmm.
She needed to kind of claim back her voice, her power, and speak up. And who the hell was I to deny her that? So I had to do it. So I did it, and it was awful. But I did it.
Mm-hmm.
I will be fair to the Met Police. They were really good, actually. They were really, really kind. They were really good.
Mm-hmm.
So I will be very fair to them. They were very supportive. They never didn't believe me.
Right. And I think,
And so
Esther, what you're saying, I'm sorry.
No, you're good. No,
I think what you're
they were
saying,
good.
that's wonderful. I think, also what you're saying happens so often. People are afraid to talk up regardless of who it's to, whether it's to family, again, whether it's to a friend, whether it's to law enforcement, because they're afraid they're not going to be believed. Because let's be real, your trust to people, especially men, has been compromised at this point, right? You have been made to feel, whether it's because the person has directly told you it's your fault, or whether it's like you say, you internalize it's your fault. And so then you begin believing no one's going to ever believe this, right? But like you said, and again, I applaud you, that 20-year-old little girl, I'm going to say little girl because it happened when you were younger as well, right? That 20-year-old, really that 13-year-old little girl deserved to be heard, and she deserved to be treated with respect. But I think, as you stated with the gentleman, also those that may have been victimized before, right? And like you said, you may be protecting someone else from letting that happen to them as well. And so, again, I applaud you more, right? But I definitely applaud the gentleman as well for giving you the courage to say you have to speak up. Again, like you said, it's not easy because you had to relive it all.
Yeah.
Yeah. So as you talk about your voice, reclaiming your voice, what did that feel like? Even though there was moments, I'm sure, of fear, right? But what did it feel like to finally be able to say, this is my story, and gain that control and power back of your life?
It took a long time. It wasn't a quick thing.
Of course.
Because when I shared the story the first time through the blog, because it was written, it's almost easier for me because it was a part of me, but it was hidden.
Mm-hmm.
It was like I could hide behind a computer screen. So that didn't give me as much power as standing in the courtroom. And it was a 3.5-year journey from me first pressing charges to standing in the courtroom. It was a long, drawn out process. And the thing I found is I still struggled, even coming up to that court. I was like, I don't know if I can actually I don't know if I can do this. I don't know if I can say this. And I did the police interview, and that was liberating in its own way. I remember I walked to the police station and I was shaking. I got in there, and the New Zealand police, because mine was done over 2 countries, because I lived in one and it happened in another. But I had someone from like a rape crisis called Help, which is in New Zealand. There was someone there just to be my advocate, and the police officer there. And so they sat there, and I spoke it, and I said it out loud to someone who wasn't my therapist. And it was like a load lifted off me. And then I remember I walked home, and I walked past the ocean, and the ocean is a big healer for me. And I sat there with my feet in it, and I smiled so much that day that my cheeks hurt. And it was the craziest feeling to me, because I hadn't had a genuine smile on my face in a long time. And it felt so liberating. But then as everything got closer, and eventually I got an email from the courts or the police to say it's going to go to court. And I was like, oh. And honestly, I expected them to say there's not enough evidence, it's not going to go. Because they were taking so long to decide. And so everyone kept telling me it's not going to make it to court, it's not going to make it to court, it's not going to make it to court. And when it did, I was like, oh, okay, I have to do this. And I'd had so many people tell me that I was brave, that I was actually struggling for a long time to live up to that expectation that I felt had been put on me, because I didn't feel brave. So I didn't feel like I could be honest and truthful about the fact that going to court was terrifying. But and I didn't want to be there. I didn't want to go to court, and I still didn't know how I was going to stand there in front of him and speak. And I ended up doing this thing came up on Facebook, and it was this speaker's course. And it was basically learn how to share your story. And I took this speaker course, and I didn't do it to become a speaker. I did it to learn how to use my voice, because I'd forgotten how to truly use my voice and speak about that incident in particular. And I did this course, and I remember the first time I had to do a video where you share a bit about yourself. I didn't share that, but I shared a bit about myself, and I was so panicked. I felt sick. I was like, what the hell am I doing? But then at the end of this 8-week course, there was this Zoom live that we did. And I went and did mine with my coach, with one of the coaches. And she was like, she's like, your story, you need to share it. And I'm like, what? She's like, you need to share it. I'm like, And she spoke to the host, and the host called me onto the main stage. So there was like 500 people watching in the audience in LA, and then there was about 300 people on the Zoom. And they're like, right, we want you to do they called it the Valley, which is your 3-minute. Oh, okay. So I did it. I stood up and I did my story, and I just spoke it for the first time in front of a bunch of strangers. I had no idea who they were. I had no idea what anyone was going to think. And I got up there and I did it. And I think I was shaking and crying for about, I don't know how long after. Like, my whole body was like, what have you just done? But it was really liberating, and that gave me the confidence to then be like, okay, if I can do it in front of a bunch of strangers, I can go in that courtroom, and I can stand there, and I can share the truth and tell my story and say exactly what happened to me. And it gave me the strength to believe that I could do it. And I still want, one thing I would say to anyone, if you know someone that's been through this and they're going to go to court and you think they're really, really brave, stop telling them. It's so much pressure. So much pressure to be told you're brave, you're brave, you're brave, because you do not feel it. You feel anything but brave. And then for me, I felt like I had to live up to this expectation. And that meant that I couldn't say I wasn't okay because I was brave. If you're brave, you're okay. And it's just, it's such, people mean it in the nicest way. But I've heard it so many times, I've lost count. And it's this huge expectation to live up to that pressure. And I know they're trying to help, but it doesn't help. It didn't help me. It didn't help me. It was too much for me to keep hearing it.
So I'm putting in the chat because I want people to, when they leave today, to still have some things to take with them. And one of the things I've heard you say, two things I've heard you say today, and I'm gonna put the one right now, is things not to say to individuals are, one thing in particular, you are brave. And what I hear you saying, Esther, is that that's a lot for a person to try to live up to, because on the inside, they don't feel that way. So there goes another time in their life, they're trying to meet somebody's expectations versus working through where they are in their life. So again, to our audience, to our listeners, if you are someone that may have said that, if you know someone that is a victim of sexual assault, from Esther's mouth, from Esther's life, her experience, she is asking you all to please not tell someone you are brave, as we know that you don't mean any harm from that statement. Internally, that person's already dealing with enough emotionally. They're already dealing with a lack of trust. They're already dealing with a lack of self-esteem. And that is not encouraging words to say. So thank you, Esther, for sharing that with us. But I also want to share something else that you stated, just in case there's someone that's just joining us. Another thing I heard you say is for a parent that may have a daughter to maybe not share with them certain clothes they wear, what it can cause someone else and how it can cause someone else to react to them. Because ultimately, what, again, for anybody that's listening, that by saying that, if a person were to be victimized, they're going to assume that you were right by telling them you got victimized because you wore that, even though that may not be your words, because of the mentality or the brain of a youth, that may be how they internalize that. So those are two things I want to make sure that as we are moving on in the episode, that you are aware of certain things not to say to individuals that may have been sexually assaulted or potentially could be sexually assaulted. And so at this time, Esther, I'll go ahead and turn it back over to you.
Where are we up to? Where do we go?
So I before we go there, I want to share with you, though, we do have a listener that has stated, I'm going to put it on the screen, that definitely took a lot of courage for you to take the speaking class, right? And then also be able to use that voice and that expertise to go into the courtroom and share your story. And so, as Leslie said, good for you. And that's where we are at this point in the episode, is you walking into what did that look like from you, from the training up into you having to use your voice to tell your story.
Thank you, Leslie.
Take your time.
It was terrifying to fly to London, and I flew to London on my own, and from New Zealand that is 27 hours. It's a long journey, and I'm so used to doing things on my own. I don't really let people in very easily. And I remember I got dropped off at the airport, and I had the expectation that I'd given myself to live up to being brave. And I knew it was coming, that the court case was just there around the corner. And in a way, my ability to disassociate really helped, because I couldn't deal with it. I couldn't deal with what I was about to face. And there were moments I remember sitting in the airport lounge and I just stared into space and I felt kind of sick. And I was like, holy crap, what am I doing? But I didn't have anyone with me, so I couldn't share it. And if I'm honest, I wouldn't have anyway. I'd have said I was fine. I said I was okay. I've got this. But I flew to London, went to the police, had to rewatch my video that I'd taken, speak to the police, go through that again. Then my brother came to London and stayed with me for a few days, and we went to the courts because they showed me around because I had to come through a different entrance. So we did all of that, and they showed the different types of courtrooms I would be in, and it was, and the day came, my brother had to go, so he could only be there for a few days, so he went. And then I had some other uni friends who came, and they were great. And there was two of my like kind of best friends. One, I lived with him in uni, and another one, we'd been part of a snowboard society, and we'd always like kept in touch. And I lived with him in London. And when I said I was going to be in London for the court case, they both kind of went, "Yeah, we'll be there." I'm like, "What?" And they were like, "Yeah, we'll be there." And they came down to London. Like one came from Sweden, but he happened to be in the UK, and the other one came from where I'm from in Stoke-on-Trent, came down to London, and they were like, "Yeah, we'll be there." And they were great because they allowed me to talk about it if I wanted to talk about it, and to completely distract myself if all I wanted to do was go and see an art gallery in London, or go to my favorite London bar, or go and do whatever it was I wanted to do to feel okay in that moment. There was never an expectation that I needed to talk about it and share how I was feeling, but there was always that I always knew I could, and that I was safe to do so. So they were there with me, and they were there during the court, and they could have gone into the courtroom, and I asked them not to. So they just waited in this stuffy room for me, and while I was there. And I remember the police came to me and said, "Right, we're going." And there was a bit of a delay, but eventually it happened. They came to me. And the walk from the room we were in to the courtroom, it's like my feet felt like lead. And every step closer, I wanted to run. I wanted to turn around and just not do it.
Yes.
But I knew I would never forgive myself if I did. So I went to that courtroom, and I pushed open that door, and I like took that first step. And there were just these people in there. He was there. And I walked to the stand. And in the UK, you literally stand on the stand. There is no sitting down. And I got given some water, and I picked it up. My hand was, I had to put it, I couldn't even do it. And I knew the instant I walked into that room that I was guilty. And it was, I think I was in that courtroom for a few hours the first day, and then I had to go back, which I remember when the judge said I had to go back, the jury started to leave and I just fell down in the chair and I just broke down, and I was just in floods because I didn't want to have to do that walk again.
Of course.
And I went back the next day, and I was probably only in there for 10, 15 minutes. And
Take your time.
And honestly, the court case, standing on that stand, it was more painful and traumatic than what he did to me.
Understandable.
Because it was this prolonged attack on my choices, my character. And I was blamed the entire time. It was questions on, well, you'd been drinking, so maybe you're just misremembering. You let him into your bed. There was everything I thought was his entire defense was the fact that I'd chosen for my safety to go back to being friends with him.
Mm-hmm.
And it's such a rape myth that people wouldn't go back to being friends with someone that's done something to them. It's such a lie. Most people do to make themselves feel safe, to not have to admit what happened to them, because they blame themselves. And in that courtroom, they blamed me for everything. And in that last sentence, in the very English way, it was, I put it to you that you're misremembering. I was like, you're wrong. I put it to you that, I can't remember the second. The third was, I put it to you that you're lying.
Wow.
And it was as if she'd swung a baseball bat at me. Is the reason I never told anyone. It's because that's exactly what I thought they would think. And then she just said it. And I thought going to court, they were there to protect me. But they weren't. They were there to protect him. And I realized in that moment I was guilty the moment I walked in.
Wow.
And I was told not to give them more. So if they ask you a question, just answer that question. Don't give any more. But then there was no redirect. And I never got an opportunity to just speak about the impact of his actions.
Right.
And the impact that he'd admitted it. But he was too much of a coward to admit it when he was the one that had to face the consequences. I lived with the consequences of his actions,
Right.
but he couldn't. And to be called a liar in the very place you think is going to protect you, that nearly broke me. And I walked out of that courtroom and I knew what the verdict was going to be. I already knew.
Mm-hmm.
And I walked out. My friend saw me, gave me a hug. He had to leave. My dad was there. We got into a fight because I don't think dads know how to emotionally cope with
Of course not.
their daughters going through things like that. And then my other friend was there, and I think for the first time, I remember I sat in a bar afterwards and I just couldn't stop crying. I just kept crying. And he never asked me to stop. He never asked me what was wrong. He just let me cry. He just sat there with me and let me cry, even though the whole bar thought for some reason it was his fault, that he'd done something and it was his fault.
Right.
Because I went to the toilet and they still told me there was a back exit that I could go out if I needed to. So but he just sat there. He just sat there and he just let me cry. And that was the first time I'd let it all come out. And then when I got that not guilty verdict, like a few days later, when I'd got back to New Zealand, I went numb. Because even though I kind of knew, there was still this hope. But it kind of broke me, and I went back to my old ways, and I went straight into a job, and I disassociated, and I worked. I worked for 6 weeks straight and just worked 6-day weeks. 14-hour days is that I'm not feeling this. I'll think about it later.
Right.
And eventually I had to go back to therapy, and I had to have them help me deal with what I was feeling. Because in a way, it was like I was grieving the time I lost. And I was still so angry with him. Because all he had to do was admit it. And he would have saved me so much pain. And he couldn't do it. He couldn't do it.
So let me ask you a question. When you went back to therapy, was it like repacking, almost starting all over again? Right? Because I heard you say that you went through therapy the first time for a few months. Your therapist was able to identify some trigger responses and trigger defense mechanisms that you had lived with for so long. And then you go to court, and like you say, you come back out after the verdict, and now you're back in therapy. Did it feel like that you were starting back over again, retelling your story and trying to heal just even from day one?
It wasn't necessarily the same.
Okay.
This was more healing from the trauma that the court case had put me through.
Okay.
Because it's a whole different ball game. It's because you think finally someone's going to stick up for you and protect you, and they don't. They blame you. The courts blame you. The lawyer did her job. She did what she needed to do. But it's a broken, disgusting system that the defense is his defense and my actions, my choices, that they use rape myths. It's just the system is so broken, and it's just it's really hard to accept the system that you thought was going to help you just hurt you.
So, Esther, what I want to do for our audience, again, I want to place this disclaimer out there that if you are just joining us, know that we're talking with Esther about From Silence to Strength, and Esther's talking about her mission to change the narrative on sexual assault. As you know, this is a very sensitive topic, so it can pose a lot of triggers for someone. So if you're currently listening to this and it is too much for you, we do understand if you're not able to continue on with the episode, and that we ask that if this is triggering, that you please receive the necessary services that you may need, whether it's realizing resources are in the community, from a therapist, a friend, a family, or someone whom you can trust. But again, we do not want anyone to leave this particular episode feeling as if they are alone, that there are resources in your community, regardless of where you may live, to assist you in this matter. But we do ask that if you do stay on the episode and continue to watch it, you please engage in conversation. I do have Esther's permission that if you have any questions that you wish to place in the chat, that if she feels comfortable answering those questions, she will. And for the meantime, what I want to do is give some statistics as Esther is sharing her story with us. And we're talking about how individuals are impacted when it comes to sexual assault. And I will speak about the statistics here in the United States. So it states that every 68 seconds, another American is sexually assaulted. One out of every 6 American women have been the victim of an attempted or completed rape in her lifetime. So again, let me read that one more time. Every 68 seconds, so that's almost a minute and 8 seconds, another American is sexually assaulted. One out of every 6 American women have been the victim of an attempted or completed rape in her lifetime. And let me also share with these statistics. These are statistics that have been reported. I mean, these are women that have felt that they could report the rape case, a sexual assault. Also, we also want to give the statistics for men. Men are also victims, with the statistics indicating that around 3% of American men have been experienced, completed, or attempted rape in their lifetime. The statistics for men may not be as well reported at times for many different reasons. So I share these statistics to say that if you are a victim of sexual assault, or you know someone who's a victim of sexual assault, please encourage them to report it. Again, as Esther has stated, reporting it allowed her to share her story. Um, Unfortunately, as she stated, the outcome of what she wanted from the court was not what she deserved. But I don't think that she's saying for you not to share your story. I think what we're trying to do is get the message out that it is occurring, and that it's very important for people to share their story so that they're not living with this trauma for the rest of their life. And so at this time, I'm going to turn it back over to Esther to tell us what her mission is today when it comes to one, having a voice with sexual assault, and how do we get to the point where individuals feel comfortable coming to share their story. So this is her call of action at this point.
The one thing I would clarify is that as hard as that court case was, as hard as it was to get that decision, I'd do it again. Because in that courtroom, I was able to give back the shame that was never mine to carry. It was his. I am not to blame for his actions. And yet, he got away with it. But he has to live with it. Mm-hmm. I don't. Not anymore. Mm-hmm. So, guilty verdict or not, I'd do it again. And now what I'm working on is I'm currently building a website, not me personally, because I'm not technically minded, but I'm having a website built, and it's kind of going to be, it's almost like a Reddit for sexual assault. And what I want is a safe space for anyone that's been sexually assaulted to go on there and just share their story, not to blame and shame and name names, but it's to just get it out of your system. If you're not comfortable sharing with family, with friends, with anyone, share it there and just get it out of your system. And it's going to have the functionality to do it anonymously if you don't want to put your name. It's just, it's a safe space to just get it out, because I know what holding that in does. I know how it affects every aspect of life. So I want that safe space, but I also want a space for people to come and ask questions. So if it's kind of almost not especially men, but men. I would like men to get involved in the conversation, not just if it's happened to them, but if they know someone who's going through it and they don't know what to do, what not to say, how to help them, where they've got a space where they can go on and say, this is happening, how do I support, what can I do to go help moving forward? Because the reality is, like, the Me Too movement was amazing, it was really powerful, but it became very female centric, and change is not going to happen by women coming forward and sharing their thing. Change is going to happen when men can come forward and hold other men accountable. Because, like it or not, the society we live in, a man will listen to what a man has to say more than he will what a woman has to say, unless he happens to love that woman. And so for me, it's like, I want to take away the taboo. I don't want people to feel ashamed about sharing their story. And if they end up crying, so what? Cry, get it out. It's an emotion. It's fine. It's not too much. It's not too little. I want people to be able to have this conversation and not for everybody around the table to feel uncomfortable because they don't know what to say. And I get that. I know it's really difficult and people don't know what to say. I've sat in a room and people have not known what to say. And I get that. But I shouldn't be silenced because they don't know how to hold that space. It's that if you want to learn how to hold the space, and it doesn't mean you have to be the sounding board constantly. That's what therapists are for. That's what coaches are for. And I learned that the hard way. I would try and sometimes overshare with people who couldn't take it. And I've realized not to do that. But I should be able to say, look, this is how I'm feeling right now. Can you cope with it? Yes or no? Not today, no. Great, I'm going to go here. And no harm, no foul. But it's still such a taboo subject that people don't want to hear about because they don't want to think it's happening. But the reality is, majority of men, they could look around their female friends, their nieces, their daughters, their wives, and it's probably happened to them. They just don't know about it. They have no idea about it. And it's because it's still such this huge taboo on talking about it. I know a lot of the time what I get thrown back at me is, yeah, but a lot of women make it up. And I'm like, not the case. Yes, there are some women who do. And to them, I would ask them to seek help and figure out why it is they're making it up. Because every time a woman does make it up, they are having a detrimental impact on the women who are really going through it and the men that are really going through it. And they're having a detrimental impact because of regret. And regret is regret. You can regret a night, but you can't. It's such a small percentage of cases that are false. Yet people run with that number because it's more comfortable than dealing with the amount that it actually happens. By people you know, there will be people whose friends have done it and they have no idea their friends have done something like that. And for me, I just want to open the conversation.
Yeah. So as you say that again, Esther, I'm going to state the statistics again. I'm going to put them up on the screen as well for those that are actually viewing. Every 68 seconds, another American is sexually assaulted. 1 out of every 6 American women have been the victim of an attempted or completed rape in her lifetime. In regards to men are also victims, which sometimes is not well reported, with statistics indicating that around 3% of American men have experienced completed or attempted rape in their lifetime. And so, Esther, what I hear you saying is it's not to say that there aren't individuals out there who may not be telling the truth. But what I heard you say is that if there are individuals like that have not been sexually assaulted, but they state they have, um, we're not here to judge no one in regards to that aspect. What I hear Esther saying is to please be considerate of the impact that it does have of someone that has been sexually assaulted. Yeah. And so, Esther, I want to share with individuals. You talked about your website that's being developed, and
Mm-hmm.
I think you said it'll be up in the next month. So I want to share with people in the meantime how you'll be able to get in contact with Esther once her website is live. It is Changing Currents, which is CHANGINGCURRENTS.com. So it's changingcurrents.co.
Yeah.
Esther, is there anything else that you would like to share with our audience today in regards to any other myths that one may have, or what is our call to action to men in regards to getting on board to be an ally to help um, communicate this language to where people know that when they walk in spaces they have support.
I guess in the ideal world it just wouldn't happen, but it's kind of not how it goes. But it's for men to get involved. One thing I've seen many times is you're out and you will have a group of guys and there'll be a woman somewhere. And I've had it myself and I felt really uncomfortable because they've just been, you kind of, they flirt whatever and you're like, I'm not interested, but they keep going because they're like, oh, it's fine. And they're like, oh, he doesn't mean any harm, love. I'm like, he's making me uncomfortable. Whether he means harm or not is irrelevant. And it's like, rather than making excuses because it's your friend Joe, and Joe's always like that, and he doesn't mean harm, it's like you just have to pull them up on their actions and just be as strong enough as a man to say, not, Joe, come sit back down, she's not interested. Or just, because what I've found sometimes, it's like, men will behave in a certain way with a group of men. It's just nature. It is what it is. And they will behave in that certain way. And it's just lads will be lads. And it takes someone really strong to say that is not acceptable. And what I would say to someone is, if you are in a bar and you see someone, your friend, let's Joe, poor Joe, sorry, Joe, I don't think it's you, but and they see Joe saying something, being creepy, making lewd comments that it's just not reciprocated, is that they need to imagine all of a sudden that somewhere else is a girl they love and there's another guy who's doing the exact same thing to her. And is that okay? Would he be okay of someone speaking to his sister, his wife, his daughter in that way? And if the answer is no, to remember that she, the girl that they don't know, is someone's daughter. She is someone's sister. She is someone's niece. She is someone's wife. She means something to someone. So if you don't want to make it acceptable for another guy to do it to someone you love, don't make it acceptable for your friend or for you to treat a woman in that way. Just always picture that it's someone you love, and that will change the way you think.
Good advice. Good advice. And as I always say, Esther, that was a heart to heart. That was a heart to heart message. And so what I want to do at this time, I always say I do like a little small commercial break, even though we're not technically taking a commercial break. But I take this commercial break, give or take, to allow our audience that have been engaged, whether you've been here throughout the whole episode or you just joined, if there's anything at this time that you would like to ask, or if you would like to even join the podcast, I'm able to also invite you onto the screen as well. But if there's anything that you would like to ask, please feel free to do that at this time in the chat, and we will give you time to do that. And then we will read them on screen and have Esther answer them. So this could be a Q&A at this time. If there's any questions that you all would like to ask or words of encouragement that you would like to provide. So I always take about a 2 to 3 minute break because not everybody types so quickly. For those that's been looking, sometimes y'all see me looking down, I'm typing on my phone to put messages in the chat. So if there's anybody at this time that would like to ask any questions or give words of encouragement, as you know, Esther has shared her story and her mission to change the narrative on sexual assault. And she's given a lot of call of actions today as well, and also provided some myths that individuals may have said and or heard at some point of their lifetime. How are you feeling, Esther?
Okay.
I know this is tough, but thank you for sharing with us today. Thank you for being able to come on this space of strangers. Once again, as you said, you did this on when you was going through your coaching session, but thank you again for coming on a stage of speaking to individuals whom you don't know, but again, to be able to make a change in somebody's life. So at this time, Esther, don't look like we have any questions. So we're going to go ahead and conclude our commercial break. You're right. We're back. Take two. We're back on scene again. So Esther, again, I want to thank you for sharing your knowledge with us today, sharing your experiences. And I can tell throughout this episode, it was not easy. And the reason that it was not easy is because, again, grief and healing, I always say this, no matter what the topic of grief and healing goes hand in hand. Grief is not something that it has a timeline that ends at a certain time. Healing is not something that ends at a certain time, right? They coexist. But in the midst of them coexisting, there's trauma in the middle of that. There's trauma on the side of grief. There's trauma on the side of healing. And with trauma comes a bunch of emotions. And so I was able to see clearly through your interview today that a lot of emotions was very present, rightfully so. And what I share with other people, and I'm sure Esther would say the same, is know that your voice matters even when people try to silence it, because no one deserves to be victimized. No one deserves to take your voice away. No one deserves to take your innocence away, as it may not be easy all the time to state what has happened to you. Know that you are important. Know that you are someone, even when someone tries to tell you that you're not. And that's how I'm going to leave with my last words at this point, Esther. But I do want to tell you that Leslie once again has said, I placed this on the screen. Leslie has said, once again, I'm glad that you've shared your story. God bless you.
Thank you.
Is there anything that you would like to share as we begin to close, Esther, with our audience today?
I think the only thing I would say to anyone who's going through it and hasn't shared or has shared and is still struggling is find something you love to do. For me, it's the ocean, and I'm fortunate enough to be able to surf here in New Zealand, and I sail, and every time I'm on the ocean or in the ocean, it's the most healing thing. And the days I'm feeling really bad are the days when I have to make myself go and be in nature. Whatever the thing is that you love to do, whatever brings you that spark of joy and lets you get into your body, just find it and do it and enjoy it and let that heal you. It doesn't always have to be about words. Sometimes it just has to be about allowing yourself to feel good, which can be a really hard thing to do.
So it's tapping into whatever puts you in a place of healing, is what I hear you saying. Mm-hmm. And everybody's just going to look different.
Whatever that is.
Everybody's
whatever that is for everybody.
Yeah. So as we are closing out this afternoon, I want to thank everyone again. And I want to say, if you're seeking support from someone who can help you rediscover your purpose, reconnect with your heart, and rebuild your life while honoring your legacy of your child that you love so deeply. Again, I am Lakeisha, therapist, life coach, grief coach, and I am also the host of Heart to Heart with Keisha B. As always, we want to thank you for your continuous support. Again, if you are a new listener, thank you for staying. If you are a returning guest, Thank you for your continued support. We do ask that you continue to follow us on Facebook, YouTube, Spotify, Apple, Pandora, and iHeartRadio. Everyone have a great evening.
Good night, everyone.
Thank you for tuning into Heart to Heart with Keisha B. Remember, grief may shape our journey, but it doesn't define who we are. Healing is not a straight path, but with every step forward, you're creating space for hope, strength, and new beginnings. If today's episode brought you comfort or clarity, share it with someone who might need it too. Let's continue building this community of compassion and resilience together. Until next time, take care of your heart, your mind, and your soul. Honor your journey and always know that brighter days are ahead. I am Keisha B, and this has been Heart to Heart.